It has been, what, a week and a half since you've been back from Driftmasters? The transit broke down. It's in behind you right now, getting fixed by Dean. How did your weekend go? I wish I had been there. Tell me what I missed.
Yeah, one of the best weekends of our life. Obviously, we'll be back just over a week now. Car still sitting here, dirty, with the same dust on it from Mondello, but the experience was unbelievable. It's just the hype around the events. So even the hype just before going to the event was unbelievable. Knowing that you've got everybody rooting for you, so like the whole of Scotland, just because we were able to actually finally announce about it and advertise that we were going to be the first Scottish driver to be attending it in the 10-year history of the championship. So unbelievable feeling being able to progress to that level. And it was, even though the first round that we picked as a wild card for was Mondello, and it was quite a close round, but it still felt so special that you were booking ferries and booking travel and accommodation to go to a big event with a big team is.
And you've known about this since what, October?
October last year, we'd applied for it. I knew, we've been eligible for Driftmasters since 2021, when BDC actually was a feeder series to Driftmasters. If you podiumed in BDC for 2021 and 2022, which we'd done both, you were eligible to apply at the time, really. But there was a kind of natural progression at that point for Driftmasters. There currently isn't in the UK anymore, but at that time we weren't ready. The whole package wasn't ready. We weren't ready. The car wasn't ready. Everything wasn't ready to go. But at the end of last year, we made the commitment where I was like, I want to do it, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. We'll apply for a wildcard package, and depending on how the season goes, and the real goal at the end of it is to try and get ourselves out there enough and secure enough sponsorship that we can apply for a full 2025 season, because it's a big deal to commit. It's no longer almost just a hobby at that point. It's the time, because you're going to run a 6-round championship, but that's round the continent, so it's going to be a week off from work either side of each event. So that's 12 weeks of holidays you need just to do the event. So one, you need finances to do it, but then you end up limiting your ability to make finance by chopping out half your working year to be able to go and do it. So that is the kind of dream. That's the goal, is to potentially be applying for full season for it next year. Do everything we need to do to learn about what we need to do as a driver and car spec to get us ready, and then get the sponsors and finances behind us to be able to actually have a proper go for it next year. But the step up to Driftmasters is unlike any jump I've ever made before. We've made jumps, obviously, from going from local competition level, going to Scottish level, going to national level, and we've even been fortunate enough to do some international racing before, like with the Gymkhana, going to South Africa, and I've been part of crews going to Finland and Poland. So I've been very fortunate in our kind of motorsport career, but this jump was definitely the biggest we've ever made. It felt like you were really competing against professionals. When you do a national championship, you've kind of got a range of drivers. You've got people that are at the lower end, the driving or car spec ability, and you've got people that are at the high end. When you go to Driftmasters, you're dealing with everybody that's at their best of their game from their given country. So going to Driftmasters, first things first, you make the journey over. When we arrived, it was one of the biggest I put the video up when we were there at the 313 mansion. And I touched on that we were a very small fish in a big pond, and I know how that sounds bad as well, but I do genuinely mean it. Like when we arrived there and you seen the pit setups, when you see Peter Vincic pulling up a trailer that's then got an area the size of this building with an awning and flooring, and they've got 2 cars there.
And 7 salaried mechanics.
Yeah, that's it. It's like everybody that's here is here because of the fun and love of the sport, but you've got guys that are actually bringing paid crew. And it's just, it's like, to me, I'm making this maybe sound like a bad thing, but to me, all it was doing was hyping me up and go like I can't believe we're here. Yeah, I even took that photo where we were sitting right at the front of the briefing and got all the drivers are there. You've got drivers travelling for pretty much every country in the world and every continent anyway. Adam LZ making the trip for America, Josiah for Canada, the Saudi drivers. The package of people that were there was unbelievable. So just even arriving in the pit setups and seeing that, and then wandering about with our crew and seeing actually seeing these cars that you've only ever really seen in social media or on Red Bull TV from Driftmasters, and you can see them up close. And sometimes that's scary, but sometimes it's humbling as well, because you can then see like what looks like an amazing car. Some of these cars you do regard as the perfect car, but then you kind of turn up in and you realise it's like, oh, they've had that problem and they've done it the same. They've kind of found a solution the same way we've done, and you kind of know that everybody's kind of still only human, and people are just kind of winging it, similar to ourselves. So they get a problem, they make a fix, and sometimes it's a temporary fix, it becomes a permanent fix in the car, and you can see that in their cars, and you're like, this is amazing that you can see that, but you would never see that in the live stream. So it's a wee bit humbling when you can see things like that. But that was the initial kind of feeling when we arrived and set up our area. Again, claiming kind of poverty, setting like with the transit, the trailer and stuff like that. We set up our gazebo, and I'm proud of our setup. But we set up everything and with our banners and stuff like that, so we look as professional as we can present ourselves at the moment in time, which I think we do a good job of. And I'm really proud of the team, the way we conduct ourselves at events. But we set up, and you look around and you're like, holy hell, this is a big step up from national competition. Then the biggest kind of change really was the actual change on the circuit. So we could still go to a national event and still go out and practice and still go out and feel the track. We done a track walk in the morning, and for one, like, I was trying to gauge the run up, how what kind of speeds we're going to be doing, what kind of gears I'm going to be in. But when it came to practice, it was full attack straight away. Every single person's out there already on their grippiest setup, running the grippiest tyres, down at minimum pressures, and the pace of the cars was unbelievable. Because it was our first time running Mondello, I chose to chase for my first couple of runs, but straight out the gate, the pace that people were able to commit with their cars was unbelievable, especially the fact that our first couple of laps of the track were in the wet. And in the wet, we were entering possibly around 90 mile an hour, which is pretty insane, especially the fact that Mondello's a blind corner going into it.
And you've never driven it before?
Never driven it before, like watched it, done.
You've never even seen it?
I had literally just in terms of through a screen, so in terms of watching it on YouTube, spending countless hours watching and the reruns of Driftmasters, try to watch what works for different drivers. Fortunate enough to spend quite a bit of time in the simulator to try and at least get, because we're fortunate enough this car was built on a Settle Corsa as well, so we could use the car, see what gearing roughly we're going to be in. But when I played it on the sim, I actually did think the run-in was going to be long, and it was actually like, it's way longer than I thought it was going to be when I played the sim. When we went to the track, I thought when we walked it would make me feel better and go like, do you know what, it's not as long as I thought it was going to be. No, it ended up turning out to be it was even longer than I thought it was going to be. Plus, after we'd walked to clip 2, so we'd walked, I don't know, bloody about a quarter mile, the judges had drove by us and they had said that they were going to move the start line further back because they wanted to make the entry speeds higher this year. So that put the shitters up us straight away. But I tend to just overthink things, and then when you're walking the track, you're like, how am I going to carry pace through here? But as soon as I'm in the car, it's go time, and I'm in my comfort zone, and when I'm driving, I'm like, it's me in my happy place. But the practice was mixed emotions during practice. The actual driving itself, I was really comfortable with. Within maybe 2 laps, I was genuinely happy with the circuit. But our unfortunate experience was just, for the first time, for what is normally a very reliable car, we had nothing but issues. So because of probably all these changes that I've talked about through the other videos that we've done over the off season, we never really had a lot of testing time. No, it's not an excuse, but the fact that we never had a lot of testing time. And when we went to Mondello, we hadn't tested it with the new 4-inch system on it. So one of the first problems we ran into was the steering column was catching the downpipe, but that actually extended from another issue with the engine mount. So originally we're then like, the steering column was catching, so I was chucking my first 2 runs. I think I spun out on the final corner in my first run just because I chuck it into a corner and the steering just goes completely jammed. Couldn't do anything, total passenger, and we ended up hammering clearance into the brand new exhaust to try and stop it catching, but then found we'd had a problem with an engine mount. So that was another wasted lap figuring out the engine mount problem. I think after that we had a steering problem was next because I followed in behind, I can't remember who it was I followed in behind, but they straightened at clip 1. And because of the commitment level that you need to do at Driftmasters, there's no such thing as a safe run. Every single run you treat it like a battle. So leaving the gates, I'm on the guy's back end, As soon as he's initiated, I've tucked into the pocket. He straightened up and we've hit him in the front left. So I've bent a tie rod on like my third run. Came in, had to sort that, but then ended up in our fourth run, had a problem with the other side of the car where one of the rose joints had failed. So we were back in, had to align the car, but because we then ran into an issue because toe plates really only work if you damage one end, and you can reference everything to like a standard that a previous measurement that you've took. But it really only works when you've done one end, and we unfortunately had a problem with both corners at this time. So we had to best guess the centre point of the rack and doing the alignment to what we could actually sit in the tarmac. I think over the weekend we got like 10 runs, and every single run had a problem, which is very frustrating, especially it was basically the time that you need the car to work. The big show, and what's normally a very reliable car, we ended up running into our issues with. So that's stuff we're going to correct before going forward. We've got events coming up, Dory Fest, so we're going to get loads of testing to just iron out all these wee issues. Because following on from that, when it came to the day of qualifying, we had dry in the morning, and I think I'd maybe one run where the car was working all right, and she was absolutely flying, the most smoke she's ever made. And actually when everything was working right, it was so easy to drive. Everything just flowed, and I was actually kind of feeling in my game, and I was like, right, we've got 55 drivers, need to get into the top 32. So I was feeling fairly confident, especially after chasing a couple of guys and realising that we're not completely outpowered and outgripped. I was amazingly surprised that us running 760 horsepower might have been a little bit more in the day, just because Chris then turned it up even more. So that power was made around 1.75 bar. Chris turned up to 1.9 bar while we were over there, just so we could send it.
You were there, you might as well go for it.
Yeah, well that's it. There's no point. And if the engine was to let go, like at this point, you can never speak bad of that engine. It's been a trooper, like everything that it's done. So
it's had a harder life than my Subaru did.
It's had a hard life, to be fair, because that survived all of Ricky driving it, and that's 4 getting into 5 seasons, I think, with me driving it as well now. Don't worry, she will get a refresh at one point. But so qualifying day,
qualifying with not a lot of practice,
very limited track time, and then we ran into a problem with a misfire. Now we ended up with a couple of runs where it was coming and going, and it was hard to identify because it would only happen under boost. So in the pits, you're revving the car away, you can't really create that kind of load in the car. Everything's working fine. So with a new set of plugs there, brand new set of plugs, regapped them, put them in. But we ended up at that point, when removing one of the old plugs, one had snapped in the head of the engine. So that just caused nightmares in the lead up to qualifying.
I didn't realise that. So when I saw the qualifying runs, I think it was a 65 on your first run, and the commentators said, that's misfiring like crazy.
Well, it ended up after that run, after the first qualifying run. So we went for the first qualifying run, had a kind of semi-dry track, worst conditions kind of possible really for doing qualifying. I'll take drifting full dry or full wet, but seeing it's patchy, everybody struggles to drive in it. It's horrendous. So first run was kind of patchy conditions, but more towards the dry side. So we had every opportunity to do a good lead line. Straight away from the word go, I could feel there was a problem with the car. I think we were down 2 cylinders, so God knows what power she was actually making. But I was still able to, because of the kind of slight damp track, I was still able to spin the wheels. So decent entry, hut clips 1, 2 and 3 fairly well. And where I fell back on because of the power of the car, couldn't quite get the legs in the car to get it out towards clip 4 and fulfill clip 4, which looking back is my biggest gutting point about it as well, because if we were able to fulfill that zone, we would have probably got a decent score, enough to qualify. But never fulfilled out of zone 4. 5 was okay, and then 6 we absolutely nailed. That's like we got the money shot in terms of rotated onto the wall, put the back end on it, and ran the back end perfectly on the wall. And we've got the little lip spoiler, and the lip spoiler literally grazed the top of the concrete wall. It was perfection.
How many times have you watched that back now?
I've watched it a million times, and we're fortunate enough with Andy Green doing the photography for us over the weekend, so he got the perfect shots of that happening. So I'm actually everything was worth it just for that shot. The whole winter was worth it just to do that. As soon as the run was done, and you even hear the commentators on the live stream just talking about how the car wasn't healthy, like literally sounds like a trumpet like going round the track. It sounded horrendous. But yeah, into the pits, and we had snapped spark plug, and we had, so I literally had 3 coil packs sitting in the van, and that's not the greatest. It's just because of, at one point, lending them out and then no replacing them, that we only had 3. But it meant basically I couldn't completely identify which one would be at fault. So luckily enough, Jack Shanahan loaned us basically 6 brand new ones at a time. So 6 new ones in, and managed to, the lads, Dean and Jamie, managed to get the snap spark plug out the head without anything going inside the engine, because if actually anything did go in, it was game over. So sent us out for second qualifying run. And what's really frustrating is for the first time over the full 4 days of us being there, the car was probably working for that one run. So every single run up until that point, maybe the 10 laps, we had issues, and that was the one run where the car was working. And it's the bloody one we spun out on. But going into qualifying, literally the heavens opened up just as, so the tail end of everybody's first qualifying run, so all the kind of higher guys in the championship, they, I think, managed to get pretty much a full dry track, perfect qualifying conditions, especially for Mondello. I can definitely tell it's a track you want to drive in the dry, because it's full commit, and you can drive these cars full commitment with that first corner. You can literally rotate it on the angle, and when the car compresses in that first corner, if you commit with the throttle, it's an incredibly rewarding track in the dry. I could tell that even just for the limited experience we had. But the heavens opened up right for us starting our second qualifying run. So I'm sitting there on the start line, and I've obviously been watching the live stream in the lead up to it. So I know we scored a 65. And as I've said previously with Driftmasters, the step up is unbelievable. So there's no such thing as a safe run. And I knew the bar was pretty high, so I was like,
80s, wasn't it?
I think it was in the 80s. I think it was 85 was the cut off at this. Even at this point, me going into my second run, so there were no point in going in and doing an average run to try and qualify. It had to be full commit. And you, if you watch back the live stream, you can hear me full chat in the full wet, and surprisingly still a fair amount of grip in the car. Full chat through first, second, third, entering still about 90 mile an hour. And like when I watch it back, I had no right to enter that corner at that speed. there were no chance that was ever working it. Like I'd entered the corner, and like what was surprising is even on his Destino Max tyres, and with him running fairly low pressures, the car was actually fairly gripped up even in the wet. I think that's a combination of good tarmac and that as well at Mondello, but in the wet I was actually surprised with how much commitment you could have, but I had way too much commitment in that first corner and literally chucked it in. And then what your problem was is you've got a wet line and a dry line, albeit you've got the drifting line that you want to hit, but where the tyres, with the speed that you're doing ultimately contact, it's a slightly different area of the track. You're slightly more inward with the wet line, and I overcommitted. Then there was 3 dotted lines of the track where we have to run, what they want is the front wheels going through them, so the engine over the top of those white lines. As soon as I entered, I could tell we were not hitting them and we were just going straight on, which meant at that point we continued towards clip 3 and went on to all the fresh tarmac that had just been laid down with the first qualifying session, and we just pirouetted. And at that point I'm like, that's it. I was like, we've came all the way over here and not qualified, and I was gutted. I know a lot of guys were gutted for us, but it sucked being in the car, because it's the first time, I think it's only the second time I've ever not qualified for an event. There was once when I was first getting into BDC, I think my second ever time in BDC, never qualified, and it was a feeling I hope to never replicate, and it's never been a problem since, but I was absolutely gutted. So that was basically our weekend over at that point. So it's one of these ones, I've been incredibly hard on myself. Everybody's like, though, it's a lot to take in, new experience, new car, problems, the worst weather conditions. We had everything seemed to be fighting us that weekend, but it's one of these ones, we just need to take it on the chin. We then had overall an amazing weekend. The experience was brilliant. Got to watch the full championship on the Sunday, which saw us law on the Sunday for the main competition. It was a glorious day. The sun was splitting the trees, and I'm just sitting there obviously wanting to be on the track. But we just need to take this one on the chin and learn from it, learn all the kind of issues that we've had with the car. What's funny is most of them have actually been sorted in the pit area at Mondello. But we're here back at Peregrine Performance, and we're going to take care of some upgrades now, so refreshing some stuff. One of the issues we did run into, which has actually never really been a problem before, we've renewed all the coolant system, so our oil, coolant, fuel pressure, fuel temps are all absolutely mint now. But one thing that we've never previously had a problem with was intake temperatures. We've got a big 5-inch intercooler on there with fans, but after one run we were seeing quite high intake temperatures, which It's not overly worrying because we're in ethanol, and the ethanol burns cooler, so it kind of takes away from your intake temperature worries. But the car was pulling timing when it got to those temperatures, and that was only with doing one run of the track. So if you're then going into battles, that's going to be much worse. So Dean's ordered up a Garrett Core intercooler, and that's one of the kind of upgrades we're going to do for going into Doryfest, and basically iron out all these wee issues and go forward from there, and go forward strong, hopefully.